Welcome, everybody. I'm Jim McKay. We're going to get started in a little bit, give people a chance to join. So everybody is, you're muted as you come in, but please feel free to use the chat. Let us know who you are. I'm Jim McKay with the Children's Trust Fund Alliance. We're going to give people a couple minutes to make the switch over from one Zoom to another. We'll get started in just a minute. More folks are coming.
Yep. Yeah, people are really starting to join now. They must have just wrapped up.
Yeah, here we go. Welcome, everybody. We're going to get started in just a minute. We'll get folks in. All right, well, welcome everybody. We're going to get started here in just a couple more minutes. I'm Jim McKay. I'm the Director of Public Policy for the Children's Trust Fund Alliance and also the head of the West Virginia Children's Trust Fund. We're kind of a counterpart to the Idaho Children's Trust Fund and Prevent Child Abuse Idaho. Really just a pleasure to join you. Wish I could be in Boise in person. I was actually had the opportunity to speak at this conference 5 years ago, I think this week, and had a great time out there. Big fan of the work that Roger Sherman and the Idaho Children's Trust, Taryn and the rest of the team there are doing on so many different issues. And I know you've got a great partnership across so many different people who are part of this conference and part of the work you're doing in Idaho. So we're going to go ahead and give a couple more minutes just for folks to join, and then we'll jump into discussing how we can be more successful in our advocacy and engage and lift up our voices to achieve family-friendly policies and enact change to address some of the challenges that we've been talking about this week. So again,
hi, Jim. This is Brenda Stanley, and I'm the one that's going to be introducing you today. I was in a different room for some reason. I don't know what happened. I ended up in 1D instead of 1C. So anyhow.
Well, welcome, Brenda. Good to see you.
Nice to see you too.
Hi, Brenda. This is Carling. I'm from 84 Agency. I'm doing tech support for our meeting today.
Yes.
Yeah. So I just wanted to say hello and let you know who I am. And let everyone else know that I'm available in the chat. If you have tech problems, you can message me directly and I can help you out. And then towards the end of the session, I'll be posting a link to the next gathering. So that's easily accessible. So when Jim starts to wrap, I'll put that up in the chat as well.
Okay, that sounds fantastic. And I figure we should, let's get started. I'll begin. I'm Brenda Stanley, and I am the board chair of the Idaho Children's Trust Fund, and I am super excited about this presentation today. This is Jim McKay, and he is the state coordinator of Prevent Child Abuse West Virginia Project of Team for West Virginia Children. Jim also works as Public Policy Director at the Children's Trust Fund Alliance and serves as a member of the National Abuse Coalition and the National Home Visiting Coalition. Jim has helped create and lead various initiatives, including Our Babies Safe and Sound, Partners in Prevention, Circle of Parents West Virginia, the West Virginia ACEs Coalition, the State Task Force on the Prevention of Sexual Abuse of Children, and the Legislative Action Team for Children and Families. Previously, he was Program Director at Time Out Youth Shelter, Director of Programs for the Education Alliance, and Legislative Assistant to the Speaker of West Virginia House of Delegates. So looking forward to this. Jim, I will turn it over to you.
Thanks so much, Brenda. Appreciate, again, the opportunity to be here, that warm welcome. Again, for those who are just joining, Carling McManus from 84 Agency is going to be doing our tech support. So if you have any issues, feel free to jot something in the chat. Wish I could be in person and we could kind of have this be even more interactive, but I do want you to use the chat, ask to be taken off mute, and we can have a conversation as we go through this, just to give folks a sense of what we're going to talk about together. We know that folks are kind of anxious about policy advocacy and lobbying, and politics has sometimes got a bad rap, and people are anxious about it. So just want to talk about kind of the importance of lifting up our voices. We're going to use the allegory of the Wizard of Oz to kind of walk us through some helpful hints and experiences, just to kind of use that as a guide. Then the second part, we'll talk about what public policies actually do make a difference in the prevention of child abuse and neglect, and promoting better outcomes for children, helping prevent ACEs and so forth. So that'll be kind of the second half of our conversation together. But I just want to welcome everyone. I want to welcome those who are experienced in advocacy and have been doing this a lot as your policy. Want to learn from you, and please share those tips and suggestions. I want to also welcome those who are just kind of anxious about that, not so sure of where to start. How does this work in a virtual environment with the pandemic and so forth? Also want to just welcome those who are here because you like the Wizard of Oz, or you like Wicked. You want to see things in another way. That's okay too. Whatever reason brought you here, I hope you'll get something out of it. Do want to note that there will be some spoilers. So, if you've been waiting to watch Wizard of Oz, just note that we're going to kind of go through some of what happens in that movie. So, and that book. So, just a heads up on that. You could opt out, go to a different session if that's a concern. So anyway, that's a taste of my dad humor, and hope you're in the right place. And we'll have this conversation as we go through together. I'm going to go ahead and share some slides just to have as a background. But again, please, oops, I need to make sure I can share my sound. I'll come right back. Have a quick video that I want to share also as kind of a table setting for us here. So I'm gonna start. Let's see here. All right, you guys seeing my screen? Got a thumbs up. All right. So again, great to be here at the Strengthening Families Training Institute and talk about the Wizard of Oz and how we can learn from that lessons. So this first is a video from poet Taylor Mali, and I just love this poem. I love all of his poetry in general. So check this out.
In case you hadn't realized, it has somehow become uncool to sound like you know what you're talking about. Or believe strongly in what you're, saying. Invisible question marks and parenthetical you knows and you know what I'm saying have been attaching themselves to the ends of our sentences, even when those sentences aren't, questions. Declarative sentences, so-called because they used to, declare things to be true, okay? As opposed to other things that are, totally, not. They've been infected by this tragically cool and totally hip interrogative tone. As if I'm saying, don't think I'm a nerd just because I've like noticed this, okay? I have nothing personally invested in my own opinions. I'm just like inviting you to join me on the bandwagon of my own uncertainty. What has happened to our conviction? Where are the limbs out on which we once walked? Have they been like chopped down with the rest of the rainforest? You know? Or do we have like nothing to say? Has society just become so filled with these conflicting feelings of that we've just gotten to the point where we're the most aggressively inarticulate generation to come along since, you know, a long time ago? So I implore you, I entreat you, and I challenge you to speak with conviction, to say what you believe in a manner that bespeaks the determination with which you believe it. Because contrary to the wisdom of the bumper sticker, it is not enough these days to simply question authority. You gotta speak with it, too.
So I hope you like that. I'm gonna pull up the chat here if we can see if I can see it. There we go. So this is Taylor Mali is the speaker. He's the poet, Taylormali, and just love his stuff. He has a great poem on what teachers make, and it's just remarkable. If you have anybody in education, it's great. But what I like about this, many things I like about this particular poem, but the idea that we need to speak with conviction. And I'm curious, you know, each of you has come to this session, to this workshop, you've gotten into this work because you care about making a difference, particularly in the lives of children and in families. So what are the things that you want to advocate for? What are the things that you want to speak with conviction about? And so please, you know, use the chat. Let's hear what you care about, and we're going to talk through maybe some ways to lift up and speak with conviction. The other thing that comes to mind as I'm watching this and seeing that Taylor Mali, similar to myself, is a white man, and recognizing the elephant in the room, that it is one thing for a person in my skin with my privilege to speak with conviction and to get away with it. And it is something else for someone else who has a different identity, different gender expression, different color of skin, to speak with conviction and how that comes across. If it's a woman, they're gonna be seen as bitchy, and they're gonna be seen as, you know, any number of things by our patriarchal society. If they're a person of color, they're gonna be met with opposition and oppression. And so the way we come across that is the collective we is all of us working together so that we can collectively speak with conviction, the conviction we each have in our own heart to recognize things that need to change, but moving that forward. And so just, you know, sometimes we ask the question, we think, well, question authority. And that is a key part of advocacy, is questioning authority, but we also need to offer some conviction to some ideas and solutions. So that's what I hope to kind of get into, and again, learn from each other together. So again, you're all involved, so this is not really necessarily for you, but as you try to connect other people to speak with conviction with you, you know, people are, well, why should I get involved? What's going to make a difference? My vote's not going to count. What about this? But the reality is we have to get involved. We've been talking this morning on Dr. Watamura's great presentation about our community conditions and the decisions we make, and the fact that we're gone through a pandemic and we're continuing to go through a pandemic. If we're not coming together right now, then when will we do it? And if we're relying on others, then we're just not going to have the same level of success. So again, just you're on board, so I don't need to overemphasize that. I do want to check in a little bit about public policy, what we mean when we say policy, because we tend to talk in a broad terms. Sometimes it's about legislation and let's pass a bill, let's do this. And so public policy is generally defined as the course of action or inaction, and in our space, it's oftentimes inaction that's taken by governmental entities regarding a particular issue. It's also the decisions we make as a society about how we care for one another, how we care for our communities, the land, the air we breathe, our resources. And so these are decisions we make together. And so it is up to us, just coming together as a community. The decisions for our financial systems, our decisions around who has health care, who has access to housing, these are all shared decisions that we've made as communities, as a society, and policy is the reflection of that. So I love this. I'm seeing some spoken with conviction, Amy wanting quality child care, and a united system. Ashley, the rights of children. Want to speak with conviction about social emotional needs of children, how we support families. That's great, Kristen. Thank you all. I appreciate it so much. Keep them coming. So, what are the decisions? These are convictions we have. These are decisions we want to be made of how we care for one another. So just kind of keeping that in ground. We make these decisions. It's not the way things are is because we have chosen as a society, and those with power have chosen certain things that make things how they are, but they can change, and they do change. So keeping that in mind. Advocacy versus lobbying, get a lot of questions about this. If one kind of level, particularly we've got a lot of folks that are maybe working for community-based organizations, nonprofits, and so forth. So generally, advocacy is the big overarching term, and that's promoting a cause, educating people about it, conducting research, background information, broad area that, that's quality childcare should be available, early childhood programs, home visiting is an effective program, and so forth. Lobbying is more specific, and it's specifically related to conducting activities towards specific legislation. And so that's when you say, okay, well, here's I forget, Amy mentioned, quality childcare. She's going to advocate for that. She wants to speak for conviction for that. If there's a bill at your legislature, your state assembly, that would expand that's Senate Bill 222, then saying vote for 222 is lobbying. Saying that every child in every family in Idaho deserves quality childcare, that's advocacy. Get the distinction there, just to kind of make that comparison. Advocacy is speaking on behalf of others who are unable to speak for themselves. And for you who are social workers, who are in, I think we have some law enforcement, I think we have, a lot of community-based work, social workers and so forth, who are part of this work. You are a voice for your constituents. You're the voice for your mission. And so you're able to, this is so important that we who are working with families are able to help advocate in collaboration with those families. And so we want to uplift their voices and amplify those voices through advocacy. I'm going to skip past this just because I want to get into the meat of it. We're running a little bit, but just you don't need 1,000 people or be a policy advocate. You don't even have to go necessarily to the Capitol to be an active, effective advocate. All of those things help, but you don't have to do all those things. We get this question a lot. Wanted to touch base on what 501c3 nonprofit organizations can do. So one, you're already advocating for your clients. If you're working in homeless services or an after-school program or something like that, you're advocating to meet the needs of children and so forth. And so you want to help policies that support those clients. If I'm working with a home visiting program, we have a Healthy Families America model through our agency, and the home visitors do amazing work with each of the families they partner with and support. But there's only so much they can do when the family is living in substandard housing. and is not able to access capital and get a bank loan to be able to get access to more sustainable housing. So for those home visiting champions, we also want to talk about the homes that families are living in and be an advocate for housing and so forth. So understanding that is a key. Just a good resource for you. And maybe Carling, if you can get this in the chat, boulderadvocacy.org is a great resource for any kind of nonprofit advocacy question. It's all attorneys, and they'll talk to your board member that's an attorney that says you can't do this, and give them the confidence that you can do this. We all have those attorneys on our boards. It comes with the territory. They're great, but they also can ask those tough questions. So the Alliance for Justice can give you that person who says, I don't know if we should be doing this, all the confidence that they have. So boulderadvocacy.org gives you all the information there. And we're going to get you these slides after the fact too, so you don't have to take all these notes and so forth. The other thing in terms of lobbying, there's two different things. One is the insubstantial parts test. The other is expenditure test. And these are for charity or for charitable organizations. So it's not a foundation necessarily, which is a little bit different, but just like an after-school program and so forth like that. So the insubstantial parts is kind of default. That's what you just have automatically. It allows you to lobby as long as it doesn't become a substantial part of your overall activities, but the definition of what is substantial is kind of undefined. So we recommend, and the folks at boulderadvocacy.org recommend using the expenditure test method. It's a one-page, less than one-page form, IRS 5768. Again, all this is on that website. We'll get you these slides, but it sets a clear dollar limit on how much you can spend for lobbying and so forth. And just to put that in context, if you have $500,000 a year or less on your annual budget, you can spend $20,000 of that budget on lobbying. So I don't know how many of our small nonprofits, smallish nonprofits that have a $500,000, $500,000 budget per year are spending $100,000 on lobbying. It's just not been my experience at all. So go ahead, fill out that form, and you're going to be fine. For larger organizations, you get this kind of tiered scale on top of that. So any questions there? Feel free to use the reactions or so forth. This is kind of the dense part, but I know some folks have these questions. I want to get them out there before we get to the fun stuff. Any questions? All right. The other thing I wanted to kind of mention is that when we look at changing policy, it's not just about saying, well, I want to advocate. I want to make, we've identified this as a challenge and we're going to get this done. There's a number of factors that go into changing public policy. I really love this is what's called the Wellstone Triangle. It's from Wellstone Action, and it's based off of the work, community organizing work that Paul Wellstone, who is a U.S. Senator, great leader for our country, who tragically died in a plane crash from Minnesota. But they talk about this, you kind of need three corners or ends of the triangle. So first, you need good public policy. You need an idea that really works. So seeing about these, speaking with conviction here, the folks that you guys are asking for, like quality childcare, rights of children, and so forth. Like, we have good ideas, and particularly in the child space, we've got a lot that we know makes a difference. We know about the ACEs study. We know that paid family leave is a good idea. Every other country has it except for West Virginia. That's my home. We don't have it either. But the United States. So we know there's a good policy, but so why don't we have it in place? Why isn't it automatically there? And it's because of these other aspects. So one is electoral politics. Who sits in the legislature? Who is in the governor's office? Who is in the White House and so forth? That has an impact. And so, you can have a good idea, but if it's not supported by the people who are in office, you're only going to get some of the good idea passed. They're going to have their ideas and so forth. And then lastly is base building, the people themselves, to be able to inform and build support for the good policies, to be able to sway those who are in office. And each of these as a triangle, it goes almost like in a cycle. So good public policy is informed by the people. by the experiences of the base of people's everyday experiences. That's how you know a policy is going to be good or not. Good policy should inform the opinions of the elect who's in office. Base building, if you get somebody, I mean, we have in our home state of West Virginia, where Carling's from also, you know, Kayla Young is an incoming delegate in our House of Delegates. Last year, she was an advocate for clean water. This year, she's a sitting delegate. So it doesn't have to be a one-way, you know, well, let's just talk to those people. Those people can be us. We can move from the base building and the people to be sitting in the space of the elected position. So again, all these things go together, and sometimes we got folks that do a lot of research and say, I've got this report, I've got the issue brief, this is going to be great. Or research says that this doesn't work. Why are they doing this at the election? Why are these committee members spending so much time on this bill when it doesn't work? Why do they want to do this thing? We've tried that, it didn't work. We've got the issue brief. The issue brief will not set us free. The issue brief will not change public policy. We need all three of these things working together. Make sense? All right, so I've spent enough time talking about all this background stuff. I know we got about 45 minutes to go. We want to talk about the Wizard of Oz. That's why you're here. I know. So taking this to the Wizard of Oz, the advocacy lessons that we learned from this classic tale. First, you know, what happens? We're going to walk through the whole movie. Might skip ahead a few things, but you know, first we see for Dorothy, you know, she's going about her business, having kind of a bad day, and then suddenly this storm happens and everything. So the reminder here is that you, as people who work with families, who work with children, who have been in this space, you know more than anybody else, certainly better than most, the storms that families are facing in life. And so that's the first thing, is just to go from the experiences of everyday. A lot of lawmakers will talk about, well, this is going to be the impact. You know what the impact of a bill passing or failing is. You know what the lived experience. So, you know, somebody says, oh, the economic indicators show that we're thriving, our economy is thriving. Is it thriving in the families you're seeing, or are people being left behind? So you know better than most what the storms are. So that's our first thing. I want to ask a question, and this is an interactive piece. When we're trying to create change, build this base of power, I'm curious. There's a sentiment here that says that every social movement, every movement for change, whether it's civil rights, movement for equality, environmental movement, they all began with the same three words. What do you think those three words are? Feel free to ask to come off mute or put it in the chat. Anybody? Yes, we can. All people deserve. These are good. Not the one I was thinking, but those are good. I like yes, we can as kind of a, you know, hope, creating that. Anybody else? This is wrong. Yep, we need change. So the way I heard this was it's more referred to, instead of three words, but three letters. W, T, F. What the fudge? What the frick is happening? That's when we say, what the heck is going on? This is wrong. That's how we spur change. It's somebody recognizing that we need change, that we can do that the choices we've made can be, we need different choices, that this is wrong, that what the heck is going on, that we have an environment that is doing this, that our water is poisoned. What the heck is going on that people don't have the same opportunities? What the heck that, you know, I have to choose between caring for my family and keeping my job, which is a choice. Like, what the heck? Why is this the way it is? So asking us, what are the things that are causing you to say what the heck or what the frick? I mean, this is recorded, so I don't want to be polite. you know, WTF is going on? Those are questions that are being asked in every community across the state of Idaho. What the heck is going on? And so lean into those questions of what the heck is going on, and that's going to be a spur you towards advocacy and more understanding of what advocacy needs. Curious, as we create social change, what do you think is the most important thing that we need to ask to create this change, to build a movement for change? What's the most important thing? Feel free again. I hate that we're not in person where I can hear you. Love to hear you shout them out, but if you want to use the chat or let us know if you want to be unmuted. What's some of the things that are most important? It doesn't have to be the thing. Did I lose you? Money. That's always a good one. Cindy, yep. Being open-minded. Oops. I clicked. So the thing here is the willingness to kind of ask for help, to speak with conviction. The answer to every problem is a person. So it's the ability to make connection, to make an ask. You know, so if I need money, how do I get money? I have to raise money. I raise money by talking to people and asking them for money, or asking them to buy a candy bar at the fundraiser, or asking somebody, how did you raise money for this thing? How did your church buy the church van that is doing outreach? How did you do that? Oh, that's interesting. So it's asking people. And so the reminder here is we're going to go through a little more quickly through the Wizard of Oz, but you know, the answer to every problem is a person. So when Dorothy gets swept away in the storms, then she finds herself in Munchkin Land, and she's accused of manslaughter, witch slaughter. You know, she's in kind of desperate place. And so what does she do? She starts with conversation. She asks people. Here she is. She's talking to the mayor. You know, we talk about things like she's having a one-on-one conversation and talking to people about what do I need to do. And so that's how we get to build power, build that base, is by lots and lots of conversations about having the willingness to go ahead and ask those questions. So Dorothy, as our model here for learning, she has conversations. She talks to Glenda the Good Witch, depending on whether you're reading Wicked or not. And she talks to the mayor, and she has these conversations. The same goes for our advocacy. For us to know what the experience is. So I'm an advocate working on behalf of a lot of kids and families issues, but I need to talk to parents about their experience with childcare. I need to talk to childcare directors about what's going on in there before I go to the Capitol and start talking to lawmakers about what should be in the childcare bill. So I'm having lots and lots of conversations. And the other thing we really encourage when we're doing this type of organizing is relational organizing. It's one-on-one, it's face-to-face. Now this can be virtual in this space, but it's making a connection where we see each other and we can connect with each other. What do you think are some of the reasons why it's a one-on-one as opposed to let's bring a group together? Any thoughts there people want to share? I hate that I can't hear you. I hope you're still with us. The value of the one-on-one is that it's more authentic. If I'm talking to Amy or Brenda and they're talking to me, that's one type of conversation. If Roger, who's one of my best friends in the entire world, Roger Sherman, is with us, then if it's me and Roger and Brenda having a conversation, well, then that's a little bit of a different conversation. Brenda's a board member for Roger's organization. That's got some dynamics with that. Roger and I are friends and have a personal relationship. That's got some dynamics with that. I'm wondering, am I going to say the right thing that kind of reinforces what he wants or does she want, and so forth. So one person is kind of performing in that situation versus let's have a conversation one-to-one. And so when you're talking to lawmakers, they are used to getting a group of people And you will stand out from the crowd if you say, can I have a one-on-one conversation with you? Can we set up 20 minutes on a Zoom to talk with each other about what's going on in my life or what's going on with the families I'm working with? Or can I connect you to someone? Does that make sense? So this just, again, Dorothy had conversations, and we're going to find that through her conversations, she met different people. She built out a whole squad of people that helped her get where she wanted to be. Some of the things we want to do with this is explore and connect with each other. So we have kind of a way that we talk about is really kind of a three-phase approach to any one-on-one conversation. First, I want to know, tell me what matters to you. What do you care about? What's your conviction? Why do you do this work? What made you run for office? What is it? What matters to you? I want to know what you care about. Before I start sharing what I care about, I really need to invite somebody to share what they care about. And then I share what matters to me because I'm here and I care about things and I've got conviction and so forth. And then the third is, can we work together? And it used to be, how can we work together? We'd ask this question, but sometimes folks just aren't worth wasting, they're not there yet. It needs to marinate a little bit more. So, but can we work together? And if we've had a good exchange back and forth, then usually the answer to that is yes, we can. And you want to leave with a commitment, some type of a commitment. Will you follow up? Will you have another call? Will you talk to this person about this other thing? Will you read this? Will you sponsor a bill? Will you speak in favor of the bill on the floor? Will you ask another legislator to co-sponsor the bill? Will you vote for the bill? All these different levels that build commitment. But you want to get to a yes. You want to sell to a yes. Get them to say yes to something, and then you build off of that yes to something else. The same goes for what I'm talking about lawmakers, but the same goes for building our power and building our team of people who are advocating. So it's like, what do you think we should be doing with this? I think we ought to have we ought to write a letter. We ought to get the people at this church to do this, or at this community program, this circle of parents group. I think they'd want to know about that. That's great. How can we build off that? So getting off of that commitment. Make sense? So, and some of the questions that you can ask to get this curiosity about what matters to them are things like, where did you grow up? How did you get from there to here, and so forth. The next thing that the Wizard of Oz shows us is that we want to be aspirational. So Dorothy has her conversation. She's building out her one-on-one. She's being informed by the experience of those who have knowledge that she doesn't have, and she's learning from them. But then they said, okay, where do you want to go? And so this is the reminder that we want to be aspirational. And so for her, she wanted to get to the Emerald City. She needed to follow the yellow brick road to get there. So we want to ask ourselves, what are our goals? What is it that we want to accomplish or change? And again, this comes from conversation, having lots and lots of one-on-one conversations, either from the decision makers, the policymakers, but also the people themselves. As I said earlier, the kind of like WTF situations that are going on. How do you know that's a WTF situation? What the heck is going on that I have this situation? So that's where we get to this, what do I want to change? And then we map out our approach to change that. So that's the next reminder. So now we're getting to meet some other people. We got the Scarecrow here. What do you think the Scarecrow's reminder is for us? Come on. That's not a spoiler for everybody. I think some people have seen this show.
Use your brain.
Use your brain. Yes. Who was that? Somebody came off mute. I loved it.
Okay.
Thanks, Amy. I love hearing voices, not just in my head. That's great. So the brain, we got to be, we got to think through. We got to use our brain. We got to have good strategy. We have to determine effective messaging. We stub our toes so much in the messaging space, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that. We also identify our tactics and activities. So often, I think in our advocacy, what I've seen is like one thing works, and then we like that it worked. We had a sit-in at the governor's office, and that really worked. And wow, we're going to do that. So next thing you know, everybody wants to do a sit-in at the governor's office. It's like we do the same thing over and over. Well, why didn't it work? We got to use what different ideas at different times, think creatively, ask these questions, and identify what we want to do. We want to be smart about this. This is hard work. there's no real blueprint for it. So be creative, use your brain. That's the reminder of the scarecrow. We sometimes chart out things like this as an impact and winnability. So when you look at an issue, what's an issue that would have a really high impact? We want to spend a lot of, this would make a big difference. Paid family medical leave makes a big difference. The minimum wage, increasing the minimum wage and lifting people out of poverty makes a huge difference. I know in Idaho, you did a lot of work to get Medicaid expansion, and that's serving so many families. But the winnability is also a challenge. So ideally it's in this quadrant here where it's easy to win and high impact. The challenge is that's not always the case. If it was easy to win and high impact, we would have done it already. But so you just kind of want to lay things out. Where is a big high impact policy and where are those opportunities to move it? So again, just thinking through our brains, what would make sure we have an impact? There may be a less of an impact issue, but it's very winnable. So let's go and get it. Let's win that win and then build off of that, build that power, celebrate that, and then go for a bite of something bigger next time. Build off of those relationships and building power in that way. So next we're going down the yellow brick road and we see the Tin Man. So what was the Tin Man after? Gotta have heart. Thanks, Bubba. Yep. Gotta have heart. And so this one is a reminder, this is important work. It's work we care about. We want to be, what we have going for us as opposed to some other lobbyist groups and so forth is like, it's about children and families. We care about children and families. Everybody claims to care about children and families. They have some different approaches to get there and to express that care, but like use your passion, what you care about, and let that drive you. But it's also a recognition that self-interest drives action. So to move people, it's not enough for me to speak to what I want. I need to find out if Roger is the decision maker, what Roger cares about. And so again, that's kind of goes to that earlier conversation about what matters to you and understanding what matters to you and then making that connection. Because if I'm speaking to their self-interest and not my self-interest, then that's going to be where we're more likely to have success. Example of this that I was part of, the Asthma Coalition of West Virginia was working on a bit of legislation, and it needed to go through one of the lawmakers that was kind of key to their success was the chairman of the education committee. And so what they went in is they said, do you know that students miss more school due to asthma related absences than any other reason? And that was not something on that person's radar at all, but they care very deeply about getting kids in school. They had a truancy thing and so forth like that. So asthma, which is kind of this public health side, was able to talk in the education space. We've seen that with education, with home visiting and other outcomes. How do we make that connection to health outcomes or so forth to broaden the value of speaking to other people's self-interest, not just ours as maybe kids advocates. Desire overrules needs. So people have needs, but they seek their wants. So like I have certain level of things. This kind of goes to like our behavior around eating and so forth. There's times I really want that delicious dessert, and I'm going to crave that dessert, and I don't need that dessert, but I'm going to go for it. And so keeping that in mind as we speak to not just our heart, but a reminder to speak to the desires of the others. In doing this through messaging, we talk about this as kind of the action connection, and just to kind of let you know, so we've got this bucket of activity, and it takes reflection. Ask the questions, what do we care about? And then look at our audience and what do they care about? And ideally, our core message is in this overlap of where the difference is. So we talk about values-based messaging that, that in our state, we care about our children, we want them to have a prosperous future. Well, that's a shared value, prosperity, fairness. Those are connection points. So we want to have messages that resonate in that connection point, instead of just kind of getting in the nuance of, let me tell you about family resource networks and child care development block grants, CCDBG, and the licensure requirements and so forth like that, we get caught up in all the jargon of our work that we lose our messaging. So just to keep that in mind, we want to have our core message in this overlap. I bought this in just for today, but I think we can learn a lot in terms of the messaging and speaking to our hearts and speaking to our wants by how things are marketed to us by the people that really have like billions of dollars. So when you think about the example of a box of brownie mix, what is it that they explain in order to get you to buy that box of brownies? First, there's a big picture. It's a mouth-watering brownie. I just want to eat that. And that's how we visualize. So how do we make a message that visualizes what we want to accomplish? We talk about the benefits. It's organic. It's got chocolate. Chocolate is a benefit for sure. That's a protective factor. I think it's the sixth one. I'm pretty sure. It's in plain language. There are ingredients and other things in there, but they're not the main point. So you get your, you can have your citation on there and so forth. On the back is clear, simple steps with pictures. So the same way, and we get a fact sheet, and looking at Carlin, because I've sent her a whole bunch of stuff to tell her, I send her a issue brief about 720 pages and say, can you make a brownie box out of this? And she does, which is awesome. You need good people like that on your team. But it's how do we make this, in a compelling way? We're going to keep that big picture of what we're trying to accomplish. Why do we care about childcare? What does that mean for your family? What does that mean for the lawmaker's family and the people they care about, their grandkids and so forth? Talk about those benefits. So remember our heart. That's the Tin Man. Next, we get the lion. And what's the lion remind us of? You gotta have
Courage.
Courage. Thanks, Kristen. Thanks. Yeah, this is daunting work. It takes courage to speak truth to authority. Going back to the poem I mentioned, at the top by Taylor Motley, it's one thing for me. It's daunting to speak with conviction, but in my skin, I can speak with conviction easier than someone else with a different identity. And so it takes courage to speak with conviction, to take a risk. What happens if they pull my funding? What happens if there's a consequence to that? And so it takes supporting each other and building power out and building allies and connection that we help support each other. If we try something and it fails, what's our response to that? Do we have nurture and care, or do we start pointing fingers at each other? So we want to support each other and be courageous. It takes a lot to do this work, and also recognizing that it takes more for somebody who's been marginalized. So thinking about Dr. Watamora's comments earlier today about the marshmallow experiment and so forth, like people's reaction, we tend to, if we view it just through our lens of our experience, we may view things one way as rational or irrational. But the reality is that it could be perfectly rational for somebody else's lived experience. And so recognizing this takes courage, and lifting that up, honoring that is a key reminder from Mr. Lyon here. Continuing down, we look at our opponents. So it's not so much that we, work just for what we want. We know there are other factors. It would be easy if it was just like, okay, let's get this. But there are other opponents out there, people who have different opinions and approaches. So we want to look and see what they're saying and do our due diligence to review that. I see, Bubba, your comment about the vulnerable. Yeah, absolutely. It takes unbelievable amounts of courage to speak up and to speak with authority. And the power of somebody using that is just immeasurable. It's really tremendous, and it mitigates then against these. I was always scared of the flying monkeys. Oh boy! But then when we look at what happened in the movie version, with the witch, it was ultimately a water that kind of dissipated. She wasn't as scary as we thought, and so the threat was dissipated. The other thing I think of with this, kind of dividing up our opponents and so forth. We've got a key factor, and this happens sometimes with tax reform and so forth like that, where somebody wants to cut taxes on a certain item, sales tax on this, or tobacco tax or income tax or sales tax or things like that. So you end up with the different parties working. So can you just split some of them off? Can you have, if it's environmental regulations or something that have an impact on local health, are there areas of like, well, no, I'm really key into this area and somebody else is key into that. So it's not just even within, it's not, we tend to think of things as Republican or Democrat, but within the Republican Party, there are all kinds of different factions. Within the Democratic Party, there's all sorts of different factions. There's people that are unaffiliated with any and partner on certain things and others. So how do you work those together? So anyway, just identifying your opponents, keep that in mind. I want to keep going because I want to make sure we have time to talk about the policies that make a difference also. So again, we've made it through. I didn't even talk about the falling asleep in the poppy fields. We got to rest, take a break. This is ongoing work, so keep that in mind. Maybe not involving poppies. That's maybe something we want to avoid. But take a nap, enjoy the outdoors. Those are good reminders. But then, it's time for action. We're going to the Capitol. It's time to have our connection. So first and foremost, be kind to the gatekeeper. Make sure you nurture a relationship with the scheduler, the receptionist. They're juggling a lot of demands. And I have seen people would never treat somebody. It's been so surprising how they've treated with disrespect people who answer a phone for a public office. Well, you work for me and you should tell him to do this or tell her to do that and so forth like that. It's like, that's not helping us. This is somebody that's probably more aligned with us and working class, et cetera, than not. And yet, particularly if it's somebody that's got a high profile, their boss is a high profile opponent, and then they end up attacking the gatekeeper, the receptionist, for something that their boss did. I mean, how many of us have had a boss that we didn't agree with? That's, so it's not, we could build an allyship. Instead, we're adding more headache for that person. So recognizing where they're coming from, show them some kindness and you'll be rewarded. So be kind to the gatekeeper, always good recognition. They can give you lots of, well, this might be a time when you could get in with the person, or this, just it can really have rewards. So now we get into the Capitol, and we need to keep in mind that, by definition, our state capitals are awe-inspiring. They're built wonderfully beautiful buildings, but they're kind of like intimidating. And so it can be easy to get distracted by like, wow, look at this, there's marble, and look at that, and the history of this space. And that's all great. But also recognize that there are real people with real lives working in that Capitol, or working remotely to that Capitol in our current situation. So keeping in mind, again, they're real people. Asking those conversational questions. What matters to you? What do you care about? Can we work together on this? Is going to really make a difference. Remembering they want to look good to their followers. So not to be in a threatening posture, but just to like, this is a real opportunity for you to express some leadership and to do something that really makes a difference. We want to celebrate that, amplify that. So that's going to resonate. We're talking about the Emerald City. It's a green city. And when you get to the Capitol, a lot of things are viewed through green glasses, through what's the bottom line? What are the dollars and cents? But, so that goes a couple ways. One is recognizing that we want to be good stewards of the funding that we have. But also, I mean, it's somewhat of a trap when we just get into the invest in kids. It has a high return on investment. When I look at my children, I'm like, wow, Jonah, that's a great investment. I'm glad Carol and I had Jonah. He's going to be a great investment. No, he's my son. I celebrate because he's a human being, and he's got, he's going to do amazing, wonderful things. So, recognizing where the green glasses and the dollars and cents go in, but also not falling into that sense. I think we lose the heart of what we talk about in our issues when we talk only in dollars and cents. So I just caution us against that. It feels a little bit going back to that brownie box that, we're talking about the recipe and what the temperature is and how to get it to come out, and losing track of this delicious brownie, this amazing child that's going to do wonderful things and the opportunities that go with that. So just to keep that in mind. But we can get distracted by the majesty and recognize that it's a real person behind that curtain. So last but not least, so we've gone through the journey, we've made these connections. The last reminder here from the Wizard of Oz is to remember that there's no place like home. And so making these connections, once you're in the midst of a legislative session, there are hundreds and hundreds of bills. Committee agendas get full. There's just getting tugged in so many different directions. And so for the recognition to be able to make connections at home and speak to people who represent you from your home area is really key. Recognizing and engaging your family, your friends, your neighbors in what you're doing. But last but not least, remembering that these decisions affect people's lives. Every decision, every statistic is a story. And so taking those statistics and making them real through the lived experience of, let me show you what this is like. So if 53% of people in your state are having trouble making ends meet, what does that mean to an individual family or to families in this person's district? So remembering that these decisions affect people's lives is really key. And then, when we get to the Emerald City and we're remembering that, Glenda says, remember you had the power, you just had to learn it for yourself. You had the power inside. And so that just goes to our resilience, our connection, the power, a lot of different people have been organizing together over the last several years on different issues. And, what we often say is that the power of the people is stronger than the people in power. And so remembering that we as individuals and collectively, when we organize together, even those who have been oppressed for far too long, how do we build those connections and build that power to dismantle that oppression and that situation and make a difference? So that's kind of the backdrop of how we advocate for it. I think we've got about 20 minutes left. I want to talk through kind of what are the policies as we look at our aspiration of what are the policies that make a difference. But let me stop my share just for a second. Are there any questions on any of that? And if not, I can jump into the policy side.
Feel free to just unmute yourselves. You all have the capability of doing that.
All right. Well, I'm gonna keep going then. Again, appreciate the participation where we can have it. So when we look at the policies that help children and families thrive, we use a few things that kind of guide us in this work. Back on my slide, Carling, are we good for essentials? Yeah, okay, thanks. So one of the documents, we look at the research and again, kind of good policy, what does that mean? Going back to that triangle, the electoral politics, and then the lived experience, the base building and so forth that goes through the three sides of the triangle. So first is essentials for childhood. What are the ways that we help create safe, stable, nurturing environments and relationships and environments for all children? This is led by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. And so they've identified certain policies, and we talked about this a little bit earlier, but when we talk about ACEs and the things we're trying to address, food insecurity, this graphic is called the pair of ACEs. So we tend to think about childhood adversity, adverse experiences, things that happen where there's substance abuse, homelessness or houselessness, food insecurity, lack of health care. Those types of outcomes are kind of the leaves of a tree that come from adverse community environments. So where we have poor quality housing, lack of opportunity, poverty and discrimination, those roots of the soil help contribute to why there are these other outcomes on the other end. And so when we address what are the policies that affect this, we have to address not just responding after the fact, and as important as child advocacy centers and trauma-informed care and so forth, we also want to prevent these bad outcomes from happening in the first place. I love that Dr. Watermura was speaking earlier today. I use this slide in almost all of my presentations. She talks about, we hear a lot about the social determinants of health, but we need to remember that those are actually health consequences because of structurally embedded inequities, that the communities we live in, the policies we have decided upon, contribute to inequities, which then have an adverse impact on our health and well-being. So we need to address those inequities and those policies that further those inequities in order to achieve and achieve the goals of policies that will serve children and families. And so when we say inequities, what I mean is that it's unequal allocation of power and resources based on lines of race, gender identity, class, those with lower income have less access to this than others, sexual orientation, gender expression, immigration status, think of indigenous peoples and so forth, which I know are a key part of your work in Idaho. Any of those other dimensions of individual and group identity, when we divide things up and there's not when there are barriers to having shared opportunities or things that reinforce these inequities, then we're going to have bad consequences. And so for us to achieve what we want to be aspirational, we need to dismantle those things. The consequences we know are grave. So this was a report, probably Dr. Merrick, I wasn't able to join her session yesterday, but I'm sure she talked about the impact of ACEs and adverse childhood experiences on public health, leading to depression and heart disease and obesity, all these different economic challenges and health risk behaviors. But when we look at the impact over time, and as negative as they are, we know that they are also preventable. So I want to talk briefly about the strategies that help prevent ACEs. So again, this is from the CDC. They've identified kind of 6 buckets of activity. First and foremost is economic supports for families. The more we have strong financial security, the better outcomes we have. And particularly when there's disparities, as Dr. Watamura has said, where one group of a community has a lot more wealth and another group has far less and doesn't have access to make ends meet, then there are going to be consequences of that. There's a lot of research on this. Chapin Hall from the University of Chicago has a lot. We don't have time to get into it right now, but they found that like states that limit access to TANF, the temporary aid to needy families, have increased risks and rates of foster care. States that limit access to SNAP benefits or food stamps have increased rates of foster care. We know the outcomes are there. Meanwhile, when you have a refundable earned income tax credit, you have home visiting with concrete supports that help meet the needs of families and help secure their economic well-being, then rates of child abuse, rates of foster care decline. So we want to really make sure we're reinforcing this economic security of families. That's a key factor. Social norms, protecting against violence, how we engage with each other. So this gets to some things like corporal punishment, spanking, and so forth. So how we care for one another and the situations that we care for one another is key. Ensuring a strong start for children is a whole other bucket. So that's where we talk. I know we got some childcare and home visiting advocates, preschool development programs, in particular the home visiting and other early childhood programs that work with the whole family are key. Teaching skills, social emotional development and well-being is another key bucket of activity. Connecting youth and caring adults with activities. So we know that that youth, we tend to focus a lot on early childhood, but we know that teenagers and older youth, make sure we meet their needs, that they have effective programs and have mentoring opportunities and so forth to connect into this also goes to like kids aging out of foster care and so forth. Do they have the support systems necessary to thrive as caring adults? And then last but not least, that we are intervening to lessen harm. So when a trauma has occurred, that we're responding to that, providing healing, mental health counseling and so forth like that to help lessen and mitigate the harms, because there are going to be some times when child abuse does occur, when domestic violence is occurring in the home. So what are our practices to help buffer against the impact of those things when they happen? So that's kind of the buckets from the CDC. We know that the way we accomplish this is through partnership. And so each of those different buckets involves not just one agency, but all of us working together, whether it's schools, government, business, legal, the healthcare, churches, homes, all of us working together in partnership. I know you've done a lot of work at Idaho on the protective factors and the strengthening families protective factors, and just want to kind of reinforce this from a policy lens as well, that we tend to focus a lot on risk factors, on vulnerable populations. But the difference is that the reason why somebody could have a high ACE score but still succeed, despite having a lot of adversity in their life, is also the presence of protective factors that buffer against the impact of that childhood adversity, of those negative experiences. And so we need to focus on these protective factors. I think probably folks on this call are familiar with them, but parental resilience and building social connections, knowledge of parenting and child development, what to expect. In the policy realm, concrete support in times of need is really, really key. And we've seen that even more so during the pandemic, when these structural inequities have been revealed even stronger. We know many families were struggling before the pandemic, and the pandemic has made things even worse. So making sure there's concrete support in times of need, and nurturing that social emotional competence of children. So we work across that to promote those protective factors. But the reality too is, again, protective factors are not equally distributed across our population. They are more likely to occur in certain places than others. And so how are we addressing the equity issues when it comes to protective factors as well? Are we increasing, when we talk about concrete support in times of need, a lot of the legislative proposals that get proposed are about how to prevent fraud, waste, and those types of things. And how do we make sure somebody doesn't get SNAP benefits that's ineligible? We don't ask the same question about, like, how do we make sure the system doesn't deny SNAP benefits for somebody who's eligible? We don't think as much about that as a society. And I wish we would, do more of that, because we put in a lot of systems to verify eligibility that end up denying people who have need, and the children that are part of those families denies them what they need in the interest of efficiency or other things. So making sure we're looking at all these issues collectively is critically important. A couple final things. So this is Pillars of Hope, which Dr. Sagi has been promoting, and I think you guys have spoken about this as well, but just another way of thinking about this, kind of the 4 different areas: relationship, the environments that we live in, that we engage each other, and connection, and we support the social emotional development of children. So all of those things going together is another lens of looking at what we want to accomplish. So this is real small print, but I'll make sure you get a link to it in with the materials. And I don't think this was in the slides I sent to Carling, but a lot of questions about the American Rescue Plan and what our lawmakers are doing in response to the pandemic. And so this is the bill, a summary of the bill that passed and was signed into law last Thursday by President Biden. And so when you look at what are the different aspects that help support children and families, there's actually a lot of good family-friendly policies in this bill. First, the critical area of childcare and early learning. So there's $40 billion for childcare, Head Start, and helping sustain our childcare infrastructure so that that's available for families. That we have economic security, both through extension of unemployment benefits, the $1,400 person direct rescue payments that should be coming out any day now to your bank accounts. They've expanded those to include older youth who were left out of the first 2 rescue payment plans. So if you've got a 19-year-old son, like I do, they're gonna get that. My son's already decided how he wants to spend it, which is part of privilege that he feels he has that choice. But the enhanced child care credit is huge. This child tax credit is going to be money going to families, $300 per month, probably beginning in July. If you have a child under age of 6 or under age 4, I think it is, it's going to be huge to be able to help pay the rent and help offset expenses for childcare and so forth. Some other areas, we're really excited about the opportunity for funding for child abuse prevention, grants. I think Idaho is estimated to get about $1 million through that program. Home visiting has gotten some support, meeting these basic needs and so forth. So expansion of healthcare and others. So just one example, and the way this bill came about, there's a lot of factors. I mean, there are electoral politics going on in this for sure. We understand that. There are good policies that have been on the drawing board for some time that needed to be enacted, and this bill is an opportunity to address them. We have been making the case for many years that home visiting and that child abuse prevention programs needed more money. We knew the idea was good, and this opportunity gave us an opportunity to get that bill passed because of the opening with electoral politics. But none of this would have happened without base building. If you recall, in December, the people said, "What do you mean $600? $600 is not enough. We want $2,000." And people came out all across the country, and that was the impetus to say, we need a bill to meet the needs of families. Small businesses spoke out about the need for another round of paycheck protection. All the different constituency groups spoke out and was accomplished through this. Now, is it a perfect bill? No. That's part of the process, but there is a lot of positive things for families in this bill. And we understand the electoral process of reconciliation is also complicated. I come from a similarly ideological state where a lot of our Congress people didn't vote for this bill, but they supported parts in the bill. And we want to build relationship with them to build more support for the things that they care about, and how can we work together. So again, you may think this is a really bad bill, but I guarantee there's some things that help families in your communities as a result of this bill. And so how do we make sure that they get implemented and effectively in a caring way? Hope that makes sense, but it's an example of kind of how all three of those areas, the base building, the good public policy, and the knowledge of electoral politics play into it. Lastly, we go to 2:05, so we got 5 minutes, right? Okay, real quick, I want to get interactive here just a bit at the end. I want to ask you a question. So what are the best ways that kids get the most candy and treats at Halloween? Any thoughts? Come off mute. Let's hear them. How do you get the good stuff?
You go to the right neighborhood.
Go to the right neighborhood. What do you mean by that? Tell me about that.
Well, in my neighborhood, because there's no homes really around here, we get very few trick-or-treaters, so they know I give out the massive big bars, and so they come here.
Yep.
I tempt them in.
Yeah. Go to lots of homes. I see Kristen. Great costumes. Be polite. Yep. Other ideas?
If they're cute or act shy, usually you get more.
If you're cute or shy, yeah. What about threats? Do threats work? I'm going to egg your house if you don't give me the good candy bar, Brenda. Does that work? Depends on the kid, maybe. No threats. Yep. So I'm going to pull up my screen one more time. I got kind of a example here. Let's see. So this comes from Stephanie Vance, who's just an amazing advocate herself. So she says, when we want to trick lawmakers, it's the same type of thing. So I just want to empower you. This seems like, oh my gosh, he's talking about lobbying Congress. What do you mean we're going to lobby Congress? But we talked about like the courage of those youth who are part of foster care, and they've spoken up. The courage it takes to lift up our voices. But if you have been successful or you're helped your child be successful in trick-or-treating, then you know all the skills. You want to be adorable. You want to stand out from the crowd. How is our message? How is our ask standing out from the crowd? One way you do that is by saying thank you, not being greedy, following up after you send a connection, building relationship, having your effective message, not just like, if you have something you say at the meeting, you're going to get that extra candy bar in your bag. Maintaining the reputation. I think Brenda, you said you've got the good stuff. You got the candy bars, the full size candy bars. So people are going to go to your. So this is for us as advocates. Like once we get to be a reliable source that, what do you think about this bill? That's great, because then we are in relationship with a lawmaker and we can say, you know what, I don't think this is going to do what you think it's going to do. Have you thought about it this way? So once you have that reputation and nurture that relationship, it's really key. And then remembering that we give more to our friends and family. So building relationship so that it's not just somebody they've heard from via an email, but it's somebody we've had a connection, we've had conversation with. That's going to be a key factor in our success. I want to close with a couple other things. So any questions on the how we stand out? Any examples come to mind? What you've done that's been effective in advocacy? Check in the chat here. I see somebody took us to the neighborhoods where people had money. Yeah, similarly going to legislators, right? Yep. And I think that the number too, like you said, going to a lot of houses, going to a lot of calls, having a lot of one-on-one conversations over and over and over again. Who do we know? Asking, oh, who else can I talk to about this? With organizing, we talk a lot about a combination of grassroots and grass tops. So if we're talking to somebody that's active with a after school program, then we're like, okay, is there a group we could talk to that's got all the after school programs, or does your ministerial association get together, or does your Rotary Club have a conversation? Could I come to the Rotary? I don't need to speak. I just want to attend and make connection at the Rotary and build connection that way. So it's about volume and connecting out that way. Great ideas. I do want us to think, sometimes it gets overwhelming. We think, oh, how are we going to do this? We're talking about addressing poverty and equity and all these factors. But I just want to use this as an example that when our country makes a commitment to do something, we can accomplish those things. So this chart, which is very, yes, Kim, I'll definitely send the slides. We've got those as a recording, and we'll get you the actual slides too. So in the 60s, this chart shows the senior poverty rate. And so for age 65 and over, it was nearly 40% in 1969. Well, that was during my lifetime. I'm 53 years young. And nearly half of our senior citizens lived in poverty. By 2011, that rate had declined to about 11%. And actually in the late 90s, it was just above that. And so this is when we get to the Great Recession timeframe, where it's around 11%. So how did we cut senior poverty like by 75%, from almost 40% to just about 10%? We did that because we made a commitment to expand Social Security, to expand homestead exemption. I mean, even in this 10-year period, we went from 40% to under 20%. We cut it in half. And so how do we do the same thing? Because this darker bar graph is child poverty, where it's gone up over that same period of time. From 1979, it was about 15% to almost 25% in 2007, and it's gone up even higher in the decades since. Now, the American Rescue Plan is anticipated to possibly cut child poverty in half. I mean, that's a great accomplishment. So how do we continue to do that? And actually, with the senior poverty rate, we stopped doing some things in the 90s, or we probably could have narrowed it even further. And also recognizing this is a population level. I know that, again, for Black, Indigenous, people of color, these rates are much higher. So I know that this chart also measures an average, which leaves many people behind. So we need to always keep that in mind. But we can make that same commitment that we made to seniors, to our children, then we can have the same results. And so we need to work through that. Lastly, just a reminder to keep together. Sometimes I get called a snowflake. I used to take offense to that, but snowflake is pretty fragile. Each of us, an individual, is pretty fragile. We can only do so much. But when we connect to each other, then we can accomplish a whole lot more. So that's my time. Here's my contact information. We will provide the slides, and other information. I know we're at the end of our time together. Carling has shared a link to the next session. Again, my great appreciation to get to spend this time together. I wish it was in person. Hopefully we can be in person soon. So Brenda, any final words on your end? And I'll wrap it up on my end.
I have no final words except for I really appreciate you doing this. It was very interesting. And I must admit I was intrigued by the Wizard of Oz stuff, but got so much more out of it. So I really, really appreciate you doing this. I want to remind everybody to please fill out the evaluation form. We really read those and use those as we're making our plans for future conferences. And Jim, I hope you will be able to join us in person at one of our future conferences. It would be very nice. So anyway, thank you all. And I believe that the link was put up to go into the next gathering. So if you want to just click onto there.
Just pasted it again.
Yep. All right. Thank you so much. And Carlin, thank you. I appreciate your help.
Yeah.
All right.
Thanks,
again,
everybody.
Jim.
Thank you. Bye.